when I sit down in front of public television, I don't consider it as wasted time at all. It's an education for me. My buddies always used to call it smart TV.
He walked away from a six-figure banking career that most people spend their entire lives chasing. No audition, no resume, no experience in front of a camera. Just a desperate email about wallpaper. And somehow, that became a 20-year run as the face of America's most trusted home renovation show. But right now, at 57, something is shifting. Cast members are quietly disappearing. Longtime fans are asking questions the show isn't answering. And Kevin O'Connor, a man who has always chosen his words carefully, is finally ready to talk. What he says next changes everything you thought you knew about this old house. The cracks. Nobody was supposed to see. For 2 decades, Kevin O'Connor made it look effortless. Every season, same energy, same curiosity, same guy crawling under floorboards and asking the questions homeowners were too intimidated to ask themselves. But somewhere around 2022, loyal viewers started noticing things that didn't add up. Norma Brum, the man who had been swinging a hammer on that show since the very first episode in 1979, was gone. 43 years of craftsmanship, and then just silence. No send-off special, no tearful finale. He was simply no longer there. Before that, Roger Cook, the show's landscape expert since 1982, had quietly stepped away due to health issues. Nearly 40 years on one show, and his exit was handled so carefully that some viewers didn't even realize he was gone until they started looking for him. 2 legends out within a short window of each other. And Kevin? He kept showing up. Same smile, same hard hat, never once addressing the elephant in the room on camera. Then the online chatter started. Forums, comment sections, Reddit threads, all asking the same thing. Was Kevin next? Some said he looked tired. Others pointed to the fact that he'd been expanding outside the show. Podcasts, speaking engagements, business ventures. The theory wasn't crazy. It had happened before, twice, with the 2 hosts who came before him. And neither of those exits were clean. What made the speculation louder was what Kevin wasn't saying. He'd grown comfortable pushing back on things he disagreed with publicly. He'd taken shots at modern DIY television. He'd defended old craftsmanship against critics. He was not a man who stayed quiet when he had something to say. So his silence on the subject of his own future felt deliberate, calculated even. And that's exactly what kept people watching and waiting. Before the show, there was a completely different life being built. Here's something the casual viewer probably doesn't know. Kevin O'Connor was never supposed to be on television. Not even close. He was born around 1968 in Maplewood, New Jersey, the kind of place where a house is always a project, and a project is never really finished. He grew up with 4 brothers and 2 sisters in a home where his father, a civil engineer, treated the family property like a permanent construction site. Before most kids his age had learned long division, Kevin already knew how to read a blueprint and hang drywall. Hammers and levels were just part of the furniture. He graduated from St. Benedict's Preparatory School in Newark in 1986, then went on to the College of the Holy Cross, where he studied history and graduated in 1990. That might seem like an unusual path for someone who'd eventually become the face of home renovation, but it taught him something more valuable than technical knowledge. It taught him how to research, how to explain, and how to make complex things feel accessible to ordinary people. He wasn't done. In 1999, he earned an MBA from Boston University and stepped directly into a high-stakes corporate world. He started at Fleet Bank, working in sports finance, helping structure funding for stadiums and large-scale facilities. He wasn't just crunching numbers in a back office. He was helping build the places where entire cities gathered on weekends. From there, he moved to Bank of America and climbed fast. By his early 30s, he was a senior vice president managing commercial real estate portfolios worth millions. The salary, the bonuses, the stock options. From the outside, it looked like the finish line most people spend decades trying to reach. Then he walked away from all of it. Not because he failed, not because he was pushed out, but because he never forgot what it felt like to grow up in a house that was always being built. The wallpaper email that nobody was supposed to change history. In 2003, Kevin and his wife Kathleen bought a Queen Anne Victorian house in Beverly, Massachusetts. Built in 1894, it was exactly the kind of home that looks stunning in photographs and becomes a full-time nightmare the moment you move in. Every room needed work. New kitchen, new bathrooms, structural fixes that revealed more structural fixes underneath. But the thing that finally broke them was the wallpaper. It wasn't just old. It had been painted over so many times that removing it felt like excavating an archaeological site. The walls had rounded Victorian corners that made standard removal techniques useless, and the more they scraped, the worse it got. At a point of genuine exhaustion, Kevin sent an email to the production team of This Old House, not as an aspiring TV host, not as someone looking for exposure, just as a frustrated homeowner who grew up watching the show and figured it was worth a shot. He explained the wallpaper problem, asked if there was some technique he was missing, and hit send without expecting much back. What he didn't know was that the show's producers were at that exact moment developing a brand new spin-off called Ask This Old House. They needed a format. They needed real homeowners. And Kevin's email landed at exactly the right time. The crew came out, filmed a segment, and what Kevin thought was a one-time visit from his renovation heroes was actually something else entirely. It was a screen test. He never auditioned. He never submitted a reel. He just asked questions, the same questions any homeowner would ask, and he couldn't stop. The show's contractor, Tom Silva, barely got a break the entire shoot because Kevin kept pulling him back into conversation. The producers noticed. They saw someone who was naturally curious, naturally watchable, and who made expertise feel like a conversation rather than a lecture. After the shoot, Kevin asked the crew for a photo because he was convinced he'd never see them again. 3 weeks later, his office phone rang. It wasn't a client. It was the producers of This Old House offering him the hosting job. Not just the spin-off, the original flagship show that had been running since 1979. He thought someone was playing a prank on him. He asked his boss to hold his position at the bank open because he genuinely expected to be back within a year. What he inherited was heavier than anyone warned him about. To understand what Kevin stepped into in 2003, you have to understand the history he was now responsible for carrying. The show started in 1979 with Bob Vila. Vila built This Old House into a genuine institution over a decade, but his exit in 1989 was anything but graceful. The short version is that Vila had been earning almost nothing by industry standards. He started at $200 per episode. Even in his final seasons, he was only pulling in around $800 per episode. Over 10 years, his total earnings from the show came out to somewhere between $47,000 and $188,000, less than what many of the contractors he worked alongside were making annually. So when a rival home improvement retailer offered him $500,000 in endorsement deals, he took it. The problem was that this old house was sponsored by Home Depot and Weyerhaeuser, direct competitors. PBS gave him a choice: the endorsements or the show. Vila chose the money, and he was fired immediately. His own agent found out from a press release. Then came Steve Thomas, who hosted for 14 years and won an Emmy in 1998. But in 2003, at age 50, he disappeared from the show without a farewell episode or any formal announcement. Just a vague statement about wanting more time to sail and ski. Viewers were confused. Insiders found it odd. The show that had made him a household name suddenly moved on, and Thomas ended up on smaller productions for the DIY network. The pattern was not subtle. 2 hosts, 2 exits that left more questions than answers. Kevin walked into that history fully aware. The producers had screened more than 400 candidates to replace Thomas. Then they spent 1 shoot with Kevin and stopped looking. The actual job offer happened in a basement with the show's creator, Russell Morash, sitting in beach chairs. That informal setting didn't reflect the weight of what was being handed over. When he showed up for his first real days on set, there was no orientation, no welcome packet. Richard Trethewey, the show's plumbing and heating expert, handed him a shovel and pointed him toward a sewer line that needed digging. Kevin, fresh off a career as a senior vice president at one of the country's largest banks, spent his first days on television doing actual manual labor. Every blister was a lesson in what the show was actually about. Tom Silva handed him real wood and told him to cut it on camera, knowing full well every mistake would be caught. The message from the crew was clear: earn it or don't bother. Kevin earned it, and within a single season, he received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Service Show Host. Critics who had questioned whether a finance professional had any business hosting a technical renovation program were quiet after that. The feuds, the silence, and the philosophy. He refused to compromise. Kevin O'Connor is not someone who picks unnecessary fights. But when he believes something strongly enough, he says it out loud, and the consequences tend to follow. At some point during his run, he was asked about the broader landscape of home improvement television. What he said sent a shockwave through the industry. He described most modern DIY programming as worthless, content that couldn't hold his attention for more than a few seconds. He didn't name specific shows, but the target was obvious. He was talking about the cable network model, the fast flips, the weekend transformations, the glossy before and after reveals that left out the part where a homeowner tries to replicate the project and ends up with structural damage. He went further. He said these shows were misleading people. They presented timelines and budgets that didn't exist in the real world. They dressed up entertainment as education and sent viewers home with dangerous expectations. He called it a philosophy war between what this old house had always been, a teaching tool, and what renovation television had largely become, a spectacle. HGTV personalities pushed back. They argued Kevin didn't understand their audience. They weren't trying to train contractors. They were making home improvement feel accessible and exciting to everyday people. The debate got loud, and Kevin didn't back down. What also fueled the tension was how Kevin consistently defended old construction methods that modern builders dismissed without context. He argued that builders from a century ago weren't cutting corners out of ignorance. They were working with the materials and economics available to them. Coal was cheap. Fiberglass insulation didn't exist. Criticizing their choices without understanding their constraints, he said, was exactly the kind of shallow thinking that made modern renovation television so frustrating to him. He extended that same logic to the tiny house movement, pushing back on the popular idea that smaller automatically means greener. A poorly insulated small home, he argued, can consume far more energy than a well-built, large one. That position put him at odds with sustainability advocates, but he didn't adjust his view to avoid the friction. But here's what made people even more curious. Through all of that public friction, through all his willingness to criticize trends and challenge industry norms, Kevin never once mentioned Bob Vila by name. Not a tribute, not a criticism, just absolute silence about the man who built the show Kevin had spent 20 years carrying forward. Insiders read that silence as strategy. Vila is still a significant name in the renovation world. Reopening the story of his exit, even with neutral language, risked dragging the show back into old conflict. Kevin had always played a long game. He understood that some doors are better left closed. That same instinct for self-preservation and brand protection is also what made the departure rumors so interesting to observers. Because the one thing Kevin O'Connor had never done was talk openly about his own future on the show. He'd addressed everything else: his opinions on craftsmanship, on new builds versus old ones, on the tiny house movement, on sustainability debates. But the question of how long he planned to stay and what would come after, he'd been silent on that entirely. Until now. At 57, he finally says what everyone has been waiting to hear. The rumors had been building for a while before Kevin addressed them directly. Online communities had pieced together a circumstantial case. He was expanding his presence beyond the show faster than made sense for someone fully committed to staying. The podcast, Clear Story, launched in October of 2019, had ranked in the top 1% of all streamed podcasts, with a 4.8 out of 5 rating on Apple. That kind of traction doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't stay side project energy for long. Then there was his speaking career. He'd become a fixture on the keynote circuit, pulling in anywhere between $15,000 and $50,000 per appearance. In 2024, he headlined Equip Exposition, a major landscaping trade event in Kentucky. His talk wasn't about renovation. It was about the future of the contracting industry, about staying ahead of shifts, about where the business was going. That's not a conversation a man has when he's focused entirely on the next season of a television show. There was also his financial footprint, which had quietly grown well beyond what a TV hosting salary explains. His net worth sits somewhere between $5 million and $7.68 million. He holds stock investments valued at around $5.1 million through Bridge, a company where he serves as CEO. Those assets generate approximately $1.5 million annually on their own. Add the speaking fees, the editorial work with This Old House magazine, the tool rental platform he co-founded, and a picture emerges of someone building something much larger than a television career. His involvement with the show's digital expansion told a similar story. In 2021, This Old House partnered with Roku to make all 1,500 episodes from both the flagship show and Ask This Old House available for free streaming, alongside a 24-hour channel. Kevin was central to that push. He understood that the audience wasn't disappearing. It was just watching differently. Reaching them on new platforms wasn't a compromise of the show's identity. It was the only way to protect it. That kind of forward thinking doesn't come from someone who sees himself as a temporary caretaker. None of that is the behavior of a man coasting. It's the behavior of a man preparing. When Kevin finally addressed the speculation directly, he was measured, but honest. He made clear that he isn't walking away from this old house under any cloud. There's no feud, no contract dispute, no version of the Bob Vila story playing out quietly behind the scenes. What he described was something more straightforward and in some ways more significant. He talked about legacy and transition in the same breath. The show has always survived its hosts, he acknowledged, pointing to the fact that it outlasted Vila and Thomas both, and came out stronger each time. He said he's thought about what a responsible handoff looks like, not because he's leaving tomorrow, but because he's 57, and he takes the show's future seriously enough to think about what comes after him. He also pushed back on the idea that his outside ventures signaled disinterest. He framed them as extensions of the same mission. The podcast, the speaking, the business investments. All of it connects back to educating people about how homes work, how the industry works, how to make smart decisions with the biggest investment most families will ever make. He sees himself less as a TV host and more as someone who built a platform with this old house at the center and expanded outward from there. What he didn't do was give a retirement date. He didn't announce a successor. He didn't frame any of this as a goodbye. What he did was something rarer and, honestly, more interesting. He treated his audience like adults and explained his thinking without the theatrical drama that usually surrounds these kinds of announcements in the entertainment world. For a man who once asked his bank boss to keep his desk warm because he expected to fail at television, it was a remarkably clear-eyed statement. Kevin O'Connor didn't stumble into this career. He built it the same way he approaches every renovation, slowly, carefully, with an eye on the structure that needs to last long after the cameras stop rolling. And by that measure, it seems like he's nowhere close to calling this project finished. What are your thoughts about what Kevin O'Connor finally addressed? Share with us in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. For more interesting stories like this, be sure to click on the next video that pops up on your screen. You never know what you'll discover next.